So a few weeks back, we heard of a leak that for the time being doesn't do us much good. Like, it's still a ways off. It's not for the new season of Black Ops 6, nor is it even COD 2025 or Black Ops 7 or whatever that may be called later this fall. Instead, this goes one step further and is a leak about COD 2026, what's presumed to be a Modern Warfare 4. And while I don't normally care too much for this kind of stuff because it's so far out there, it really isn't on the radar at this moment. This one in particular is just one that caught my interest that I wanted to share with you. A potential return of DMZ, and in a way that may actually do it justice. Something that did not happen, I think, with Modern Warfare 2. So drop your thoughts as we go along, drop a like if you enjoyed the video, and make sure to subscribe for more Call of Duty and other FPS coverage. I'd love to have in the community, but for now, let's get into it. So the information today comes from the Ghost of Hope, a leaker or insider who's had a number of things on his track record pan out to be entirely accurate. So while things, as always, are moving targets and things are subject to change, I think it's at least worth hearing out to have a discussion. Also, one of the cool parts about this being so far out is that while there's a minimal chance of it, there is still a chance that feedback here, even on this video, could be taken into consideration, as we're still like 20 months out from the launch of a Modern Warfare 4. So plenty of time to make adjustments in design philosophy and in gameplay if they're trying to listen to the community in some of these things. So that's one of the cool things that we might be able to take away from this being so early. But the information that was presented alleges what I'm hearing so far about the current plans for DMZ with COD 2026. It will have its own maps and a dedicated forked version of Warzone's engine. We'll share a map set with Ground War instead of the BR, and they're currently debating whether to make it PvE or PvPvE or both. Biggest thing to take away from this is that they're very much not repeating Modern Warfare 2's mistakes and are separating Warzone and DMZ for both communities' sake. To clarify a bit further, some additional details that I think are pertinent are the way the maps could work. It'd be a hard deviation from what we may be used to, which is kind of cool after the last few years, where Hope followed up saying the Ground War maps would be pulled from the DMZ map or maps and not from the Warzone map. So that means you'd have entirely different play spaces, which is pretty cool, and honestly, I think would make the game mode, or even all game modes, feel a bit more fresh, because as we've seen the last couple of years, Warzone and that big map is kind of where a lot of the content comes from. Not having everything pulled from one same large world like we've seen in recent Warzone map introductions could be pretty cool to see. Also, another follow-up point was that it does not appear to be linked to Warzone, but rather solely Modern Warfare 4, which in and of itself is a huge point of discussion, which we'll get to in a second. But to break this down a little bit further, piece by piece, I kind of want to start with the last bit here, that DMZ 2.0 would not be connected to Warzone. Aside from the idea that it would not be sharing the map with Warzone, that would also indicate that unlike Modern Warfare 2, DMZ would be a premium or paid experience, a third mode and not like a fourth mode like it kind of was in Modern Warfare 2. For me, it kind of feels like the time constraints definitely hit both Spec Ops and DMZ, where both had solid spurts of updates and like random pieces that are like, oh, that's a good update for that mode, but nothing that really like all year round kind of kept it going and making it anything exciting. Like raids for Spec Ops, every time there's a new seasonal update for a raid, that was cool, and there were sporadic updates for DMZ, but neither really thrived with content updates all year round. And if I'm remembering correctly, after Season 4's launch, there really wasn't an update to DMZ for the rest of the year, and I think at that point we only had one additional raid left to go. So whether this replaces Spec Ops is still a huge question mark, but the disconnect from Warzone does appear to mean another big thing, a disconnect in potential mechanic sets. This kind of ties in with the point of it having its own dedicated forked version of Warzone's engine, meaning that while the core of the game will still be the same, we'd finally be able to have that tactical feel that was embedded to the core of Modern Warfare 2 with DMZ, but this time around without sacrificing the pace of play in both multiplayer and in Warzone. You would functionally have two different mechanic sets for two various different portions of the game. Perhaps things fundamentally down to like backpacks again while not affecting Warzone, slides that could be canceled in MP but perhaps not in DMZ to keep a more tactical approach, and other things. You could have almost the more for lack of a better term, clunky feeling and slow pacing that DMZ had, which for DMZ I do think was solid. Like, I do think it wasn't a bad thing, while also not sacrificing what people enjoy out of the pacing and what's available for multiplayer with Warzone experiences. I'd imagine if it is forked, it would be a matter of like settings available to be toggled for players that by default, it's turned off for DMZ or Warzone or one or the other, but then could be adjusted if you want to end up having that. Just the prospect of having a game that isn't beholden, though, to one mechanic set while offering that is what's the huge part. I love DMZ for what it was, but absolutely hated the gameplay was basically the root of all multiplayer, all Warzone. It just straight up took the arcadey, fast-paced game of recent years and then slowed it down to a milsim arcade hybrid, a much slower version of what people had come to expect. And I'm not here trying to argue one way or the other, whether it's good or bad, but that's objectively what happened with DMZ and Modern Warfare 2. Now, the topic of them debating PvPvE versus just PvE is another interesting point, because this in the original mention was something that filled up the replies with people's opinions on it. Like, some were really like, it will fail if it's only PvE, while others, a lot of people also were like, I won't stop playing if it's PvE. Personally, I think if it's at all possible, we've seen plenty of other games in the extraction genre start to do this, I think it should have the option for both. Try to appease both player bases. The people that love to team and have that sort of thrill of losing all their gear to another actual player gunfight, but also the people that don't want that. The fear of losing your gear and dying is what makes the thrill of an extraction shooter that dopamine hit where completing a raid feels so accomplishing, but there's also the huge market for PvE. I mean, that's what Spec Ops is, that's what Zombies is, while repackaged with perhaps different goals and sort of gameplay loops. It's still PvE. So I think that if it's at all possible, if it's a part of the Modern Warfare 4 experience, not part of Warzone and free-to-play, then it may overtake the development of Spec Ops, and I think it would be great in that sense to end up having both. And honestly, might be nice to be able to do Easter eggs or cool things in PvE while getting better XP or earn rates of items in PvPvE. I'm sure there's a way to work it where both could really be valid and they could thrive. Now, that also brings me to the final topic that I want to talk about and discuss a little bit, is the curiosity of third modes versus free to play. Because this is one of those things that I'm wholly unsure of, where would it do better one or the other? Each offering pros and cons, obviously. Like, if it's a paid offering, there are pros where you're going to have, in theory, less cheaters, because who wants to pay $70 to cheat and then again when accounts get banned? Unless you're just a massive loser, which there are those people out there. And in theory, it means more attention and updates as a paid content offering. But then on the downside, the cons, you have no possible longevity. Like, when Modern Warfare 4 ends, so would DMZ 2.0, and you'd have a lesser player population than if it was a free-to-play offering. And if it is a free-to-play offering, you take the inverse of that list and apply it the same way. So one of the things that I thought was a mismanagement of DMZ the first time around was that it was free-to-play, but it got minimal attention compared to what it could have been, and it was not upkept after the year was completed. I certainly don't have the insight into industry trends like the people who run these data models do at Activision, making the plans for 4 to 8 years out, but I do feel like extraction shooters are still very much so in their infancy and have a very high ceiling for what it could be in terms of potential popularity. And I've said it from the very beginning, DMZ was a perfect entry-level extraction shooter. It's not serious, nor did it really take itself too seriously, but it was a great entry into what the gameplay loop was about. There was no exclusive or high-tier loot really that made dying really the end of the world, but you got the itch of loading in, gearing up, completing missions, and finishing a raid, getting out of there with high-tier loot, maybe picking up a weapons case, and completing a raid all the same. Not to mention, they finally made adjustments to the systems in place with these sort of armory overhauls, with how you unlocked items and progressed, the wallet systems, and more, that it could have been so much more that it just then wasn't. Like, after Season 4 again, they kind of just gave up on the mode, which I never understood. So when I think about the prospect of this not being free to play and solely within the window of Modern Warfare 4, I do think that it's kind of limiting and making the largest mistake of the year that it did in 2022 and 2023, but all over again. And this time much more consciously, because at the time it was a part of Warzone and it was something that was free to play. So you're limiting it consciously at that point. But I guess that's where it just comes down to, I don't make the big bucks and the call is not necessarily mine. And we're still so far out that it could be something that might not even be something we have to worry about. But with the issues that people have with Warzone, the burnout people have on BR as a whole perhaps, maybe DMZ and an extraction is the next big project that has multi-year longevity. But again, I guess we'll have to wait and see. For now, though, that is the information that we had, and perhaps surprising report that DMZ 2.0 is looking to be on the horizon, with the presumed Modern Warfare 4 in 2026 in Infinity Ward's next offering. So let me know your thoughts down below. Would you guys like to see DMZ return? Would you like to have it be something that you'd like to see again in any updated capacity? Let me know. But if you guys enjoyed the video, you found it at all insightful, do me a favor, drop a like on it. Of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Call of Duty, Black Ops 6, Battlefield, and other FPS content. I'd love to have you in the community. But for now, thanks so much for watching. Mine has been Espresso. I'll see you later. Take care and peace.